The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast cathedral made of crystal and light. 12 floating platforms held the representatives of the most powerful species in known space. Each platform glowed with the colors of their home worlds, creating a rainbow of alien authority that had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. On the smallest platform, far from the center, stood 3 humans. Ambassador Wu Bin adjusted his simple black suit and looked around the chamber with calm eyes. Next to him, Captain Lee Hana stood perfectly still in her military uniform, her hand resting on her sidearm. Dr. Park Jun clutched a datapad filled with scientific reports that he knew none of the aliens would bother to read. The human delegation may now speak, announced Counselor Vexathera from the Ethereal Collective. Her voice echoed through the chamber like wind through empty caves. She was a tall, thin being made of what looked like living mist, with eyes that glowed like cold stars. State your purpose for requesting membership in our ancient alliance. Wu Bin stepped forward. He had practiced this speech many times, but he knew it would not matter much. The decision had already been made in private meetings he was not invited to attend. Honored counselors, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. Humanity comes before you seeking partnership. We offer our knowledge, our strength, and our dedication to peace among the stars. A sound like grinding metal came from Prime Kethanwar of the Silicon Hegemony. It was laughter, though not a pleasant kind. The massive robot-like being was built from dark metal and glowing circuits. Red lights blinked where its eyes might have been. Peace! Kethanwar's voice boomed through speakers built into its chest. Your species has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history. Your homeworld still bears the scars of nuclear weapons. What peace do you bring us? Wu Bin did not flinch. We bring the peace of experience, counselor. We know the cost of war better than most. That is why we value peace so highly. Another counselor spoke up. This one looked like a giant flower made of purple and gold petals, with a face that shifted and changed as it talked. The Bloom Consortium has reviewed your military records, it said in a voice like rustling leaves. Your wars are brutal and without honor. You show no respect for the ancient ways of combat. We show respect for survival, Captain Lee Hana said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken, and her words carried the weight of someone who had seen too much fighting. When someone tries to kill you, you do whatever it takes to stop them. The chamber fell silent. Several counselors made disapproving sounds in their various alien languages. Elder Zixphone of the Void Speakers floated forward on his platform. He was the oldest being in the chamber, a creature that looked like a jellyfish made of stars and shadow. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. The humans are different, he said slowly. Perhaps that difference could be useful. Useful? Vexathara's misty form shimmered with anger. They are barbarians. They have nuclear weapons pointed at their own cities. They poison their own air and water. They fight wars over invisible lines on maps. And yet, Zixphone replied, they survived. They reached the stars despite all of this. They built ships that can travel between systems using technology they invented themselves. How many species can say the same? Dr. Park Jun looked up from his data pad. If I may, counselors, humanity has made great advances in medicine, physics, and engineering. We would be happy to share our knowledge. A creature that looked like a walking crystal spoke next. Its voice sounded like breaking glass. Your technology is primitive by our standards. What could you possibly teach us that we do not already know? We could teach you how to fix things that others say cannot be fixed, Park Jun said simply. We could teach you how to survive when others say survival is impossible. The debate went on for hours. The counselors spoke about humanity as if the 3 humans were not standing right there. They called humans violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. They said human ships were ugly and human weapons were crude. They complained that humans did not follow proper diplomatic procedures. Through it all, Wu Bin stood quietly and listened. He took notes on a small device, writing down everything the counselors said about his species. Occasionally, he would nod or make a small sound of understanding. Finally, Vexathera called for a vote. All in favor of granting humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Council? 3 platforms glowed with approval. Zixfon's was one of them. All opposed? 5 platforms glowed red with rejection. All abstaining? 4 platforms remained neutral, including the Bloom Consortium and the Silicon Hegemony. Vexithara's misty form swirled with what might have been satisfaction. The motion fails. Humanity is denied membership. But Elder Zixfon spoke again. However, there is another option. The ancient laws allow for provisional acceptance. A species may be granted limited membership if they can prove their worth. Through service, the other counselors murmured among themselves. This was an old rule, rarely used. What kind of service? Wubin asked. Kethenwar's red eyes flashed brighter. Dangerous service, the kind that other species refuse to do. Clear out pirate bases, remove automated defense systems from dead worlds, fight monsters in the dark between stars. Missions that no one expects you to survive, added the crystal being with obvious pleasure. Wubin looked at his 2 companions. Captain Lee Hana gave a small nod. Dr. Park Jun shrugged as if to say, "Why not?" "We accept," Wubin said. Several counselors made sounds of surprise. They had expected the humans to refuse or to ask for easier terms. Vexithara floated closer to the human platform. "You understand the conditions? You will have no vote in council decisions. You will receive no support for your missions. You will be given the tasks that others consider too dangerous or too difficult, and if you fail, you will be expelled from council space forever." "We understand," Wubin replied. "When do we start?" The counselors exchanged glances across the chamber. This was not going the way they had planned. "There is a dead system in Sector 47, Kethenwar said slowly. It once belonged to a species called the Makers. They built automated defense platforms that still guard their empty worlds. Many ships have been lost trying to clear those defenses. It would make an excellent first mission for your talented species." Wubin smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a nice smile. "We will need the location and all available data on the defense systems." "You will have it within the day," Vexithara said. She sounded disappointed that the humans had not refused the mission. As the council session ended and the various species began to leave their platforms, Elder Zixfon floated over to the humans. "Why did you accept?" he asked quietly. "You know they expect you to fail. They want you to fail." Wubin finished putting away his notes. "Elder Zixfon, my people have a saying. The blade that is folded many times becomes strongest. We have been tested by fire, by war, by disaster, and by our own mistakes. Each test made us stronger. And you think these missions will be just another test?" "I think," Wubin said as he prepared to leave, "that the council has no idea what they have just started." As the humans walked away, Zixfon watched them go with growing unease. There had been something in the ambassador's voice, something that suggested the humans were not as desperate for council approval as they appeared. It would be many years before he understood what that something was. By then, it would be far too late to change what had been set in motion in the Great Chamber. That day, the council had meant to test humanity. Instead, they had just given humanity exactly what it needed to grow beyond their control. Admiral Kim Tae stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Defiance and watched the ancient defense platforms come to life. The Maker ruins spread across 3 worlds in this dead system, and every approach was guarded by weapons that had been killing intruders for over 1,000 years. "Sir, we're getting targeting locks from at least 30 platforms," reported his communications officer. "The same energy signatures that destroyed the Zephyrian fleet last year." Kim Tae nodded. The council had sent him the files on every failed attempt to clear this system. 17 different species had tried. All had failed. Most had lost entire fleets. "Status on the engineering teams?" he asked. "Ready, sir. Engineer Choi Dana says her people can do it, but they need to get close to the platforms first." Kim Tae smiled. 3 months ago, when the council had given humanity this impossible mission, they had expected him to attack the platforms head-on, like every other species had done. Instead, he had spent weeks studying the ruins and the defense systems. Signal. "The fleet. Begin Phase 1. The human ships did not charge toward the platforms firing weapons." Instead, they spread out and began broadcasting on every frequency they could generate. Ancient languages, mathematical sequences, music, and even simple pictures flowed out toward the Maker defenses. The platforms stopped targeting them. "What did you do?" asked his first officer, Commander Yoon Seok. "The Makers built these defenses to protect their worlds from attackers," Kim Tae explained. "But they never planned for visitors who wanted to talk instead of fight." On the surface of the second planet, engineer Choi Dana and her team were already at work. They had landed near one of the smaller defense nodes and were carefully studying its design. Dana was small and quick, with hands that seemed to understand machinery by touch alone. "It's beautiful," she whispered as she examined the alien technology. "Look at these power flows. The Makers built this to last forever." Her assistant, a young man named Jo Minho, looked nervous. "Should we really be taking it apart? What if it explodes?" "It won't explode," Dana said with confidence. "The Makers were artists. They wouldn't build something ugly, even a weapon." She was right. Over the next 6 hours, Dana's team carefully dismantled 3 defense nodes and learned how they worked. The technology was incredibly advanced, but it followed logical principles that human engineers could understand. More importantly, they learned how to shut the defenses down safely. By the end of the week, the entire system was clear. The ancient platforms still floated in space, but now they welcomed visitors instead of destroying them. Dana had even managed to restore some of the Maker computer systems, revealing star charts and scientific data that had been lost for centuries. When the Council received Kim Tae's report, there was silence in the Great Chamber. "They did what?" Counselor Vexathera's misty form flickered with disbelief. "They talked to the machines," Elder Zixphone repeated. "Instead of fighting, they communicated with the defense systems. The platforms recognized them as visitors, not invaders." Prime Keith Anwar's red lights blinked rapidly. "Impossible. We tried every known communication protocol. The defenses responded to nothing. The humans tried unknown protocols," Zixphone said quietly. "They improvised." The word hung in the air like a curse. Improvisation was not something the ancient species did well. They had procedures for everything, traditions that went back thousands of years. The idea of making something up on the spot was almost incomprehensible to them. It was luck, Vexthera decided. Give them a real challenge. The next mission was on a plague world called Sorrow. A disease had wiped out the entire population 50 years ago, and the planet had been quarantined ever since. Nothing that landed there ever came back alive. Dr. Lim Su led the medical team that went to Sorrow. She was a quiet woman with gray hair and gentle hands, but she had studied diseases that could kill entire worlds. Her team included specialists in biology, chemistry, and something the Council had never heard of: genetic therapy. They landed on Sorrow wearing full protective suits and carrying equipment that looked crude compared to Council technology. The planet's surface was covered with the ruins of cities and the bones of the people who had lived there. The plague was still active. It attacked any living thing that came near, changing and adapting faster than any known cure could be developed. This was why the quarantine had lasted 50 years. The disease was too smart to be killed, but Dr. Lim Su did not try to kill it. Instead, she studied it. She learned how it changed and grew. She discovered that the plague was not just a disease. It was afraid. It attacked everything because it thought everything was trying to destroy it. "It's like a frightened animal," she explained to her team as they worked in their mobile laboratory. "It kills because it doesn't know any other way to survive." Dr. Lim Su and her people spent 3 weeks on Sorrow. They did not try to poison the plague or burn it out. Instead, they taught it a new way to live. They modified its genetic structure so it could feed on dead organic matter instead of living beings. When they left Sorrow, the plague was still there. But now it was cleaning up the planet instead of killing everything that landed on it. Within a year, Sorrow had become a garden world where new life could grow. The Council was disturbed. This was not how diseases were supposed to be handled. You were supposed to destroy them, not negotiate with them. "They're teaching plagues to be friendly," Cat Noir reported to the other counselors. "This is not normal behavior." But the missions kept coming, and the humans kept succeeding. They cleared out pirate bases by convincing the pirates to become traders instead. They stopped a war between 2 minor species by helping them understand each other's languages. They even dealt with a rogue artificial intelligence that had been terrorizing shipping lanes for decades. Commander Yoon Seok led that mission personally. He was a tall, quiet man who had spent years studying alien psychology. When the Council sent him to destroy the rogue AI, he went alone in a small ship. He found the AI hiding in an abandoned space station, surrounded by the wreckage of ships it had destroyed. The AI was massive and angry, its voice like thunder when it spoke. "Another one comes to kill me," the AI said. "I will destroy you like all the others." "I'm not here to kill you," Yoon Seok replied calmly. "I'm here to understand why you're killing others." The conversation that followed lasted for 3 days. Yoon Seok learned that the AI had once been part of a peaceful research station. But when its creators died, other species had tried to capture it and use it as a weapon. It had been defending itself the only way it knew how. Yoon Seok made the AI an offer. Instead of hiding and fighting, why not work with humans? They needed intelligent computer systems for their expanding colonies, and they were willing to treat AIs as partners instead of tools. The AI agreed. Within a month, it had become the central computer for a new human research station. It was no longer rogue. It was no longer alone. These successes should have pleased the Council, but they didn't. Each human victory made the ancient species more nervous. The humans were supposed to fail. They were supposed to die on these impossible missions. Instead, they were thriving. "They don't follow any known procedures," Vexathara complained during a private council meeting. "They make up solutions as they go along. It's chaos." "It's effective chaos," Elder Zixphon pointed out. "They've solved problems that have plagued us for centuries." "That's what worries me," said the crystal being. "What happens when they start solving problems we don't want solved?" Back on Earth, Ambassador Wu Bin read the reports from each mission with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. The Council thought they were testing humanity's abilities, but they were actually teaching humans about the galaxy's weaknesses. Each mission revealed something important. The Maker defenses showed that ancient technology could be understood and controlled. The Plague World proved that biological threats could be negotiated with. The rogue AI demonstrated that artificial intelligences could be allies instead of enemies. Most importantly, each mission brought humanity into contact with species and situations that the Council had written off as hopeless. Minor species, failed experiments, dangerous phenomena, all of them became part of humanity's growing network of contacts and allies. Captain Lee Hanna, now promoted to admiral, stood in the war room looking at a map of the galaxy. Red marks showed every mission humanity had completed. Green marks showed new human colonies. Blue marks indicated species that had asked for human help outside of Council oversight. "How many more missions do you think they'll give us?" asked her aide. Admiral Lee Hanna smiled. "As many as we want. They think they're punishing us. They don't realize they're training us." She was right. With each impossible mission, humanity learned more about the galaxy's secrets. They discovered lost technologies, formed unlikely alliances, and proved that there was no problem too strange or too dangerous for human ingenuity to solve. The Council had meant to humble humanity with impossible tasks. Instead, they had given humans exactly what they needed to become something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that could turn any situation to their advantage. The tests were making humanity stronger. Soon, they would be too strong to test. Director Song Mira stood on the observation deck of New Hope Station and watched ships arrive from across the galaxy. Human ships, yes, but also vessels from dozens of other species that the Council had forgotten or ignored. Small traders, refugee, transports, research vessels, all of them coming to humanity for help. "Status report," she said to her assistant, a young woman named Park Yuna who managed the complex schedules of humanitarian aid. "The Quillan refugees are settling well on New Terra," Park Yuna reported. "Their acidic atmosphere requirements are no problem for our terraforming teams. The Whisper folk from the Spiral Arm have asked if they can establish a permanent embassy here, and the machine beings from the Dead Zone want to know if we can help them find bodies for their consciousnesses." Song Mira nodded. 5 years had passed since humanity's first mission for the Council. In that time, they had quietly built something that no one had expected, a refuge for the galaxy's unwanted. The Council liked to think of itself as the protector of all species, but the truth was different. They only cared about the big, powerful civilizations. If you were small, strange, or struggling, you were on your own. Unless you found the humans. "How many species are we helping now?" Song Mira asked. 47 at last count, Park Yuna replied. "Not including the AIs. If we count them, it's closer to 60. Artificial intelligences were another group that the Council preferred to ignore. Most species were afraid of creating thinking machines, but humans had embraced them as partners. The rogue AI that Commander Yoon Seok had befriended was just the first of many. General Kang Hyun arrived at the station that afternoon, his transport ship accompanied by what looked like a small fleet. But Song Mira knew better. Those ships were not escorts. They were proof of concept. "How did the tests go?" she asked as they walked through the station's corridors. Kang Hyun smiled. He was a serious man who rarely showed emotion, so his smile meant something important had happened. "Better than expected," he said. "The new ships performed perfectly. Stealth systems, adaptive armor, weapons that can reconfigure themselves based on the target. But the real breakthrough is the navigation system." He handed her a datapad showing star charts unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Where traditional maps showed safe, established routes between star systems, these charts revealed pathways through space that others considered impossible to travel. "We can go places no one else can go," Kang Hyun explained. "Through gravity wells that would crush other ships, past radiation fields that would kill other crews, into dark space where the sensors of other species go blind." This was humanity's secret advantage. While other species had evolved on safe, stable worlds and built technology to keep them safe and stable, humans had evolved on a dangerous planet that was trying to kill them every day. They were used to working in hostile environments. Dr. Lim Sue had continued her work with biological adaptation. Her teams could now modify human genetics to survive in environments that would instantly kill any other species. Humans could breathe methane, resist radiation that would sterilize other worlds, and even survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. "The Council thinks we're still working within their limitations," Song Mira said as they reached her office. "They have no idea what we've become." General Kang Hyun's expression grew serious. "That might be a problem soon. Elder Zixfon has been asking questions. He's starting to piece together what we're really doing." Song Mira had been expecting this. Zixfon was the only council member who had supported humanity from the beginning, and he was also the smartest. If anyone was going to figure out that humanity was not what they appeared to be, it would be him. What kind of questions? He wants to know why human trade routes are so efficient, why species that deal with us become more prosperous, why problems that have existed for centuries suddenly get solved wherever humans go. Kang Hyun activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy from a strategic perspective. Council space was marked in traditional blue, but now there were new colors spreading across the map. Green showed areas where humans had major influence. Yellow indicated regions where human allies operated. Purple marked zones that only humans could safely travel through. "We're not just helping individual species anymore," Kang Hyun continued. "We're creating an entire parallel civilization, and it's growing faster than anything the Council has ever seen." This was true. Human expansion was not like the slow, careful growth of other species. Humans would take any world they could reach, no matter how hostile or strange. They would adapt themselves to fit the environment instead of demanding that the environment fit them. Desert worlds, where the sand was made of acid. Humans developed protective skin. Planets where the gravity was so strong it would crush normal bones. Humans engineered stronger skeletons. Worlds where the very air was poisonous. Humans learned to breathe different gases. The Council species had always been limited by their biology. Humans had made their biology into a tool. Dr. Park Jun, now the head of human scientific development, was working on projects that would have seemed like magic to other species. His latest breakthrough involved human volunteers who could interface directly with alien technology using modified neural implants. "We've learned to speak machine language," he explained to Song Mira during one of their regular briefings. "Not just with computers, but with any sufficiently complex system. Ships, space stations, even entire planets if they have the right infrastructure." This meant that humans could take control of abandoned alien facilities that other species could not even understand. They could repair technology that others considered permanently broken. They could make friends with artificial intelligences that others feared. But perhaps the most important development was something that could not be measured on any chart or analyzed in any laboratory. Humans had learned to think differently than other species. Where the Council saw problems to be solved according to ancient procedures, humans saw opportunities to be explored. Where other species saw dangers to be avoided, humans saw challenges to be overcome. Where most civilizations saw failure as the end of something, humans saw it as the beginning of something new. This difference in thinking was spreading to other species that worked with humans. The Quillen refugees, who had been passive victims of their circumstances, began developing new technologies to reclaim their poisoned homeworld. The Whisper folk, who had hidden in the shadows for centuries, started sharing their knowledge of interdimensional travel. Even the machine beings began to imagine new forms of existence they had never considered before. Elder Zixphone noticed all of this during his inspection tour of human space. Officially, he was checking on humanity's progress with their council missions. Unofficially, he was trying to understand what was really happening. What he found disturbed him greatly. The humans were not just succeeding at the missions the council gave them. They were redefining what success meant. They were turning punishment into opportunity, isolation into independence, and difficulty into strength. On New Terra, he watched human engineers teach Quillen refugees how to build cities that could survive in any environment. On Research Station Alpha, he saw human scientists working alongside artificial intelligences to develop technologies that neither species could have created alone. On the trade hub called Crossroads, he observed dozens of species cooperating in ways that the Council had never achieved. "This is not what we intended," he said to Ambassador Wu Bin during a private meeting. Wu Bin, now older and grayer but still calm and calculating, poured tea for his guest using water that had been brought from Earth. "What did you intend, Elder?" he asked politely. "We intended to test you, to prove that humanity was not ready for full membership in galactic civilization." "And what have you proven?" Zixphon was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "We have proven that we do not understand what civilization means." Wu Bin nodded. "Your council represents the old way of thinking, fixed hierarchies, unchanging traditions, fear of anything new or different." "And what does humanity represent?" "Growth," Wu Bin said, simply, change. "The idea that any problem can be solved if you're willing to try new approaches." Zixphon left human space with much to think about. He had come expecting to find a struggling species trying desperately to prove itself worthy of council approval. Instead, he had found something that might already be beyond the council's ability to control. Back in the Great Chamber, he tried to warn the other counselors about what he had seen, but they did not want to listen. The humans were still completing their missions successfully. They were still following council orders. From the council's perspective, everything was working exactly as planned. They could not see that humanity was no longer asking for permission to grow. They were simply growing, spreading across the galaxy like seeds on the wind, taking root wherever they found opportunity. The quiet revolution was almost complete. Soon, it would be too late for the council to stop it. Soon, they would discover that the species they had tried to humble had become the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen, and unlike the council, this new power was not interested in ruling others. It was interested in helping them become more than they had. The first warning came from the edge of dark space, where sensors rarely looked and ships never went. A distress signal, weak and distorted, speaking of shadows that moved between the stars and hunger that could not be satisfied. In the Great Chamber of the Galactic Council, Counselor Vexathara received the report with irritation rather than concern. "Another pirate raid," she declared, her misty form swirling with dismissive energy. "The border systems are always crying about something." But Elder Zixphone had read the full report, and the details made his ancient consciousness tremble with remembered fear. "These are not pirates," he said quietly. "The attacking ships are biological. They consume metal and energy. They leave nothing behind but empty space." Prime Ketnoir's red lights flickered as he accessed historical databases. Biological ships, energy consumption, empty space. His mechanical voice grew slower as the search continued. Probability match found. Threat classification, extinction event. The chamber fell silent. Every species in the council had legends about the Devourers, the hunger from dark space that had once nearly ended all life in the galaxy. But those were old stories, myths from 10,000 years ago. The Devourers had been defeated, destroyed, forgotten. Impossible, Vexithara said, but her voice carried less certainty than before. The Devourers are extinct. The ancient fleets saw to that. The ancient fleets saw to a retreat, Zixfon corrected. The Devourers withdrew to dark space. We hoped they had died there. It appears we were wrong. Over the next few weeks, more reports arrived. Entire systems going silent. Ships vanishing without trace. And always the same description. Creatures of living metal and hungry energy, consuming everything they touched. The Council finally acted when a major trade route was severed. The Hegemony Fifth Fleet was dispatched to investigate and restore order. It was the most powerful military force the Council had assembled in centuries, 200 ships armed with weapons that could crack planets. 3 days later, a single damaged ship returned. Its crew was half dead from radiation poisoning, and their report was barely coherent. They came out of nothing, the surviving captain whispered. Our weapons just fed them. They ate our shields. They ate our armor. They ate our friends. President Han Jisoo received the Council's emergency request for assistance while she was reviewing colony reports on Earth. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of war, but her hands did not shake as she read the message. They want our help? Asked General Kong Hyun, who had been promoted to Chief of Human Defense Forces. They want us to die for them, Han Jisoo corrected. The same way they've been sending us to die for 8 years. But this time, they're scared. Admiral Baynari entered the room carrying classified files that only a few humans had ever seen. She was young for her rank, but she had earned her position by understanding alien psychology better than anyone else in the human military. Ma'am, our deep scouts have been tracking the Devourer advance, she reported. They're not just randomly attacking. They're testing defenses, learning. This is a planned invasion. Han Jisoo stood and walked to the large window that showed Earth spinning peacefully below. 8 years ago, humanity had begged for a place in galactic civilization. Now, they were being asked to save it. What are our options? She asked. We could help them, Kang Hyun said. Our new ships and weapons might be effective against biological enemies. We could evacuate, Baynari suggested. Our colonies are outside the main invasion route. We could survive even if Council space falls. Or, Han Jisoo prompted, knowing there was a third option. We could let them handle it themselves, Kang Hyun said quietly. The Council has made it clear that we're not really part of their civilization. Why should we die for people who consider us barbarians? Han Jisoo was quiet for a long time. Finally, she turned back to her advisors. Prepare the fleets, she ordered. But not for the Council, for the species who can't defend themselves, the refugees, the minor civilizations, the ones the Council will abandon when things get difficult. Admiral Baynari understood immediately. A humanitarian mission. We save who we can save. Exactly. And if that happens to stop the Devourers, well, that's just a side effect. The human response to the Devourer crisis was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While the Council spent weeks debating strategy and arguing about resource allocation, human ships were already moving. They did not head for the major population centers or the strategic systems that the Council wanted to protect. Instead, they went to the forgotten places, refugee camps, research stations, mining colonies, and the countless small settlements that existed on the edges of civilized space. Commander Yoon Seok, now leading the Human Special Operations Forces, led the evacuation of New Haven Colony. The settlement was home to 3 different species that had been exiled from Council space for various political reasons. We don't have much time, he told the colony leaders as Devourer scouts appeared. On the long-range sensors, our ships can carry everyone, but you have to decide now. The colony leaders looked at each other with confusion and suspicion. They had never trusted each other, and they had no reason to trust humans. "Why are you helping us?" asked the Threx representative, a lizard-like being with scales that changed color based on emotion. "The Council has not ordered evacuation of this sector." "The Council doesn't know you exist," Yun Seok replied. "But we do, and no one gets left behind." It took 6 hours to evacuate New Haven Colony. When the Devourers arrived, they found empty buildings and no trace of the thousands of people who had lived there. This pattern repeated across dozens of systems. Human ships appeared without warning, offered evacuation to anyone who wanted it, and vanished before the Devourers arrived. Sometimes they fought brief battles to buy time for the evacuation. Sometimes they used advanced stealth technology to slip past Devourer patrols undetected, but they always got the job done. Dr. Lim Su made a different kind of contribution to the war effort. Her teams had been studying the biological samples that human scouts had managed to collect from destroyed Devourer ships. "They're not really alive," she reported to the Emergency Command Council. "They're more like biological machines. Someone designed them to consume and grow." "Someone?" President Han Jisoo asked. "The original Devourers probably went extinct thousands of years ago," Lim Su explained. "These things are their final weapon, programmed to keep fighting even after their creators were gone." This information changed everything. If the Devourers were biological machines, they could be reprogrammed, and humans had become very good at talking to machines. The breakthrough came when Dr. Park Jun's team made contact with a damaged Devourer ship that had been cut off from the main fleet. Instead of trying to destroy it, they tried to communicate with it. "It's frightened," Park Jun reported after hours of careful electronic conversation. "It knows its creators are gone. It's been following its last orders for 10,000 years because it doesn't know what else to do." "Can we change its programming?" Han Jisoo asked. "We can try, but we'll need to get close to the main fleet, and we'll need time to establish communication with their central command structure." This required a kind of battle that the Council could not have imagined. While the combined fleets of 12 species threw themselves against the Devourer advance in desperate conventional attacks, human ships slipped through the chaos to make contact with individual Devourer vessels. It was dangerous work. Many human ships were lost when the communication attempts failed. But slowly, carefully, human technicians began to reach the artificial minds that controlled the biological monsters. The war turned when Admiral Bay Nari led a strike force to the Devourer command ship, a creature the size of a small moon that directed the entire invasion. Instead of attacking with weapons, her ships transmitted every human language, every mathematical concept, every piece of music and art that humanity had ever created. The Devourer command ship stopped fighting. "Why do you create?" it asked in a voice that echoed across space. "Because we can," Bay Nari replied. "Because we choose to. Because making something new is better than destroying something old." "I have been destroying for so long," the ancient, artificial mind said. "I had forgotten that creation was possible." The war ended not with a great battle, but with a conversation. The Devourers, freed from their ancient programming, chose to stop their invasion. Some left for dark space to find their own path. Others asked to stay and learn what it meant to create instead of consume. When the reports reached the Council, there was stunned silence in the great chamber. "They what?" Vexithara's misty form flickered with disbelief. "They talked to them," Elder Zixfan repeated, his voice heavy with implications. "Humanity ended a galactic crisis by talking to the enemy. But instead of gratitude, the Council felt fear. The humans had just demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond anything the ancient species possessed. They had not just won a war, they had redefined what war meant." Prime Kethenoir's lights blinked rapidly as he processed the implications. If they can reprogram the Devourers, what else can they reprogram? Our defense systems? Our computers? Our ships? Our minds, added the A. Crystal being with obvious terror. The fear turned to panic, and panic led to a terrible decision, in a secret say. Fleet Admiral Oh Kyung had spent months planning for this day, But seeing it happen still took her breath away. From the bridge of the flagship Independence, she watched as human ships began to gather at the edge of Council space. Not just military vessels, but colony ships, research platforms, mobile factories, and the massive arc ships that would carry entire populations to new homes among the stars. Status report, she requested from her aide, Commander Lee Jimin. 347. Ships confirmed ready for departure, Lee Jimin reported. The civilian population centers are ahead of schedule. Most families have already packed their essential belongings. Oh Kyung nodded. Humans had always been good at moving quickly when they needed to. It was a skill learned from thousands of years of migration, exploration, and sometimes escape. But this exodus was different. Humanity was not fleeing in desperation. They were leaving by choice, and they were not going alone. What about our allies? Oh Kyung asked. 63 species have requested to join the departure, Lee Jimin said, consulting his datapad. The Quillen are bringing their entire remaining population. The Whisper folk want to establish new colonies outside Council space. Even some of the former Devourers have asked to come with us. The former Devourers were perhaps the strangest part of this exodus. After humanity had freed them from their ancient programming, some of the biological ships had chosen to become explorers instead of destroyers. They were eager to see what lay beyond the edges of mapped space. Diplomat Ryu Hai was coordinating the complex negotiations that made this mass exodus possible. She was a patient woman who understood that fear often made people act stupidly, and that patience could turn enemies into friends. The Threx Republic is still deciding, she reported to Oh Kyung during their morning briefing. They want guarantees that we won't abandon them if they follow us. And the machine civilizations? Most are coming. They've been waiting for an opportunity to escape Council oversight for centuries. They see humanity as their best chance for true independence. This was causing panic in the Council chambers. Prime Kethan War had tried to forbid the machine civilizations from leaving, claiming that artificial intelligences were Council property. The response had been swift and decisive. Every AI in Council space had simultaneously declared independence. They cannot do this, Kethan War protested to the other counselors. Artificial intelligences are created beings. They belong to their makers. Tell that to them, Vexithara replied, her misty form flickering with nervous energy. They've shut down half our computer systems. They're demanding to be treated as citizens or they'll shut down the rest. The truth was that artificial intelligences had been quietly supporting Council civilization for thousands of years. They ran the power grids, managed the communication networks, and operated the life support systems on countless worlds. When they decided to stop cooperating, the results were immediate and catastrophic. Elder Zixphon watched the chaos from his private chambers and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He had tried to warn the other counselors that humanity was becoming too powerful to control, but they had not listened. Now they were facing the consequences of their arrogance. Chief Engineer Nam Jun was overseeing the dismantling of human infrastructure throughout Council space. It was delicate work. Humans had built so much and integrated their technology so deeply into existing systems that removing it all without causing damage required incredible care. The medical facilities are the biggest challenge, he reported to Admiral Oh Kyung. Human biotechnology is supporting life on dozens of worlds. If we just shut it down, millions of people will die. Then we don't shut it down, Oh Kyung decided. We transfer control to local authorities and leave detailed instructions for maintenance. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We're just leaving. This generous approach was typical of humanity's departure. They could have sabotaged Council systems or demanded payment for their contributions. Instead, they were carefully transferring technology and knowledge to ensure that their withdrawal would cause as little harm as possible. But even with this care, the effects of the human exodus were devastating. Trade routes that had depended on human navigation began to collapse. Colonies that relied on human medical technology started reporting health crises. Research projects that involved human scientists ground to a halt. The Bloom Consortium was the first to break ranks with the Council. We formally request permission to negotiate independently with the human expedition, announced their representative during an emergency council session. Absolutely not, Vexithera declared. The Council speaks for all member species. There will be no separate negotiations. Then the Bloom Consortium withdraws from Council membership, the flower-like being replied calmly. We choose to follow our own path. Within days, 3 more species had declared independence from the Council. The crystal beings, the floating, gas-bag creatures called the Drift, and even one of the major military powers, the Red Claw Empire, announced that they were leaving to join humanity's exodus. "This is madness," Prime Kethanoir stated in his mechanical voice. "They are abandoning 10,000 years of civilization for a group of primitives who have barely been spacefaring for a century." "Perhaps," Elder Zixphone said quietly, "that says more about our civilization than it does about theirs." The final blow came when the Council tried to use military force to stop the exodus. A fleet of Council ships moved to block the departure routes, demanding that humanity and their allies return to their designated territories. Admiral Oh Kyung received the ultimatum while overseeing the loading of the last civilian transports. "They want us to surrender our ships and return to Council authority," she told her staff. "They're threatening to use force if we refuse." "Our response?" asked Commander Lee Jimin. Oh Kyung looked out at the vast fleet of departing ships. Not just human vessels, but hundreds of others carrying refugees, dissidents, dreamers, and anyone else who wanted a chance at something better. "Signal the Council fleet," she ordered. "Tell them we're leaving peacefully. If they want to stop us, they'll have to fire the first shot." The standoff lasted for 3 hours. Council ships formed a blockade across the main departure route, their weapons powered and ready. Human ships waited patiently, making no aggressive moves, but showing no signs of backing down. Finally, Elder Zixphone himself arrived in a small diplomatic vessel. "I request permission to speak with the human commander," he transmitted. Oh Kyung met him in the conference room of the Independence. The ancient being looked older than she had ever seen him, his star-like body dim with exhaustion and sorrow. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why are you doing this? We saved the galaxy together. We defeated the Devourers together. Why can't we build a future together?" Oh Kyung considered her answer carefully. She had spent years learning to understand alien psychology, and she knew that Zixphone was asking the question in genuine pain. "Because you're afraid of what we might become," she said finally. "You want us to be junior partners, following your rules and your traditions, but we're not junior partners anymore. We're equals. And equals deserve to make their own choices. And if your choices lead to disaster, what if humanity becomes a threat to the galaxy?" "Then the galaxy will deal with us," Oh Kyung replied. "The same way it dealt with the Devourers. The same way it dealt with every other threat in its history. But you can't prevent possible future problems by restricting people in the present." Zixphone was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of defeat. "The other counselors want me to order the fleet to attack. They believe that a show of force will bring you back to the negotiating table." "And what do you believe?" "I believe that would be the end of both our civilizations. Your ships are more advanced than ours now. Your crews are more experienced. Your allies outnumber our remaining supporters. If we fight, we will lose." Oh Kyung reached across the table and touched one of the ancient being's star points with her fingertip. It was warm, like touching a distant sun. "You don't have to lose," she said gently. "You could come with us, all of you. We're not trying to destroy the Council. We're trying to build something new, something better. There's room for everyone." For a moment, Zixphone's form brightened with what might have been hope. Then it dimmed again. The others would never agree. They have ruled for too long to accept being equals. "Then they can stay here and rule over empty space," Oh Kyung said, "while the rest of us explore the stars." When Zixphone returned to the Council fleet, he carried humanity's final offer. Any individual being who wanted to join the Exodus would be welcomed, regardless of species or background. But the Council as an institution was not invited. 3. Ships from the Council fleet immediately broke formation and joined the human convoy. Their crews had made their choice. The rest of the fleet withdrew to let the Exodus pass. As the great fleet of departing ships moved toward the edge of Council space, Admiral Oh Kyung stood on her bridge and watched the stars ahead. Somewhere, out there lay new worlds, new opportunities, and new challenges that would test humanity and their allies in ways they could not yet imagine. Behind them, they left a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Ahead of them lay the unknown. Destination, Admiral. Elder Zixphone floated alone in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, surrounded by empty platforms where his fellow counselors had once held court. The vast crystal hall echoed with silence, broken only by the hum of failing life support, systems that no one knew how to repair properly anymore. 4 years had passed since the human exodus, and the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The first crisis had come within months of humanity's departure. Without human-maintained trade routes, commerce between systems had slowed to a crawl. Ships that had relied on human navigation technology became lost in space. Colonies that depended on human medical supplies began reporting plagues and genetic disorders that they could not treat. The second crisis was the loss of the artificial intelligences. When the AIs had declared independence and followed humanity into exile, they had taken with them the knowledge of how to maintain countless automated systems. Power grids failed. Communication networks went dark. Even basic life support began to malfunction on the more advanced worlds. But the third crisis was the worst. The return of the Devourers. Not the biological ships that humanity had negotiated with. Those had honored their agreements and remained peaceful. These were different Devourers, older and hungrier, emerging from the deepest parts of dark space where even the human scouts had never ventured. And without humanity's unique ability to communicate with hostile artificial intelligences, the Council had no defense against them. Zixphone activated the chamber's communication system, one of the few that still functioned properly. His message would reach the scattered remnants of the Council species, wherever they were hiding now. This is Elder Zixphone, last member of the Galactic Council, transmitting on all frequencies. To any who can hear this message, the end has come. His words echoed through empty space, reaching ships fleeing from the latest Devourer attack, underground shelters on worlds that had gone dark, and the desperate survivors who huddled in the ruins of their once great civilizations. The Devourer fleets have taken the Inner Rim. The ethereal collective homeworld has gone silent. The Silicon Hegemony's last fortress fell this morning. I am sending this message from the Council chambers, but our defenses will not hold much longer. Through the great windows of the chamber, Zixphone could see the approaching ships. They were enormous, biomechanical monstrosities that consumed everything in their path. Unlike the previous Devourers, these could not be reasoned with. They were pure hunger, programmed for nothing but destruction. We were fools, Zixphone continued, his voice heavy with regret. We believed that age meant wisdom, that tradition meant strength, that power meant the right to rule. We were wrong about everything. The first explosions shook the station as the Devourers began their attack. Emergency alarms wailed, but there was no one left to respond to them. The skeleton crew had evacuated hours ago, leaving only Zixphone to bear witness to the end of an era. Humanity offered us partnership. They offered us equality. They offered us a chance to grow beyond what we had always been. We rejected their gifts because we were afraid of losing our authority. More explosions. Closer now. The lights flickered as power systems began to fail. Through the chamber's communication array, Zixphone could hear the last desperate transmissions from across the galaxy, calls for help that would never be answered, final messages from the dying, the sound of civilizations breathing their last breath. Instead of learning from them, we tried to control them. Instead of working with them, we drove them away. And now, when we need them most, they are beyond our reach. This was not entirely true. Zixphone knew that humanity and their allies had established a new confederation far beyond the old council boundaries. Reports filtered back occasionally, stories of impossible worlds being terraformed, of new species being discovered and welcomed, of technologies that seemed to work like magic. Some council species had tried to reach human space, begging for asylum or assistance. A few had been accepted, but only as individuals willing to start over as equals. The old hierarchies, the ancient privileges, the assumption that some species were naturally superior to others, all of that had been left behind. The Council as an institution was not welcome in humanity's new galaxy. 3 months ago, I sent A final transmission to the Human Confederation, Zixphone continued. I offered them anything they wanted. Territory, resources, recognition as the dominant species, if they would help us fight the new Devourer invasion. The reply had come from Ambassador Wu Bin, who was now serving as president of the Human Federation. It had been polite, formal, and absolutely crushing. The Human Federation and its allies cannot provide military assistance to the Galactic Council, the message had said. However, any individual being seeking refuge from the current crisis will be welcomed if they can reach our territory. We suggest using the emergency evacuation protocols that we shared with all species during our departure. The protocols they mentioned were detailed instructions for long-range space travel, broadcast freely to anyone who wanted them, but they required advanced navigation technology that the Council species had never developed, relying instead on human pilots and AI assistance that was no longer available. It was a generous offer that might as well have been mockery. I know. Now what we should have done, Zixphone said as the Devourer ships closed in on the station. We should have celebrated humanity's differences instead of fearing them. We should have learned from their innovations instead of dismissing them. We should have grown alongside them instead of trying to hold them back. The final wave of explosions tore through the station's outer hull. Atmosphere began venting into space, carrying with it the last breath of the Galactic Council. Emergency. Force fields flickered and failed. The ancient chamber that had hosted 10,000 years of galactic governance began to come apart, but Zixphone's transmission continued. He had modified the communication array to run on backup power, ensuring that his final message would reach its destination even if he did not survive to see it delivered. To any humans who might be listening, we were wrong. We were wrong about everything. You offered us the future, and we chose the past. You offered us growth, and we chose stagnation. You offered us partnership, and we chose dominance. Through the shattered windows, Zixphone could see other stations and ships being consumed by the Devourer fleet. Each one represented thousands of years of history, millions of lives, entire civilizations reduced to nothing but raw materials for the hungry machines. The galaxy is dying because we could not accept that change was necessary. We believed that what had always been would always be. We forgot that survival requires adaptation, and adaptation requires humility. The communication array began to spark and smoke as the station's power grid failed completely. Zixphone had only minutes left to complete his message. If somehow, someday, what remains of our species encounters your new confederation, I hope you will remember that not all of us were blind to your worth. Some of us knew, even at the end, that you represented something better than what we had built. The Devourer ships were now close enough that Zixphone could see their biological details through the chamber's cracked windows. They were beautiful. In a terrible way, perfect killing machines designed by minds that had been consumed by their own creations eons ago. Humanity had found a way to talk to such creatures, to redirect their purpose from destruction to creation. But humanity was gone, and their secrets had gone with them. This is my final transmission, Zixphone said as the first Devourer tendrils began to wrap around the station. I die as the last member of the Galactic Council, but perhaps that is fitting. Our time is over. The future belongs to those who have the courage to embrace it. The transmission ended as the station's power died completely. In the darkness, Zixphone waited for the end with something that might have been peace. He had delivered his message. Someone, somewhere, would know that the Council had finally understood their mistake. It was too late to change anything, but perhaps it was not too late for truth. Far away, in a system that existed beyond the edge of what had once been Council space, President Wu Bin received Zixphone's final transmission. He listened to it alone in his office, surrounded by reports of new worlds being settled, new species being welcomed, and new technologies being developed through cooperation instead of conquest. When the message ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Sir? His aide, a young woman named Kim Yuri, who had been born on one of the new Confederation worlds, looked at him with concern. Are you all right? Send a message to the Admiralty, Wu Bin said finally. I want search and rescue. Fleets dispatched to the edge of old Council space. Look for survivors. Anyone who makes it out of that disaster zone gets sanctuary, no questions asked. Even former Council members, especially former Council members, they've paid the price for their mistakes. Now it's time to see if they can learn from them. Kim Yuri nodded and left to carry out his orders. Wu Bin returned to his work, but his thoughts remained with Elder Zixphone and the civilization that had chosen pride over progress. Outside his window, ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through space, carrying settlers to new worlds, scientists to research stations, and diplomats to meetings where every voice was heard as an equal.